Admiral Krell stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vanguard, his translucent skin rippling with bioluminescent patterns of concern. The Galactic Council had dispatched his ship to investigate an anomaly in the outer reaches of the Andromeda Arm, a primitive species that had somehow managed to survive 3 extinction-level events in the span of a single planetary rotation cycle. "Status report," Krell demanded, his 8 eyes blinking in sequence. Lieutenant Tora, a slender Altarian with silver scales, looked up from her console. "We're approaching the Sol system, Admiral. Sensors indicate the species calls themselves humans. They appear to be carbon-based bipeds with remarkably short lifespans." "How short?" Krell asked. "Less than a single galactic standard century," Tora replied with obvious disgust. "Barely enough time to learn basic interstellar navigation principles." Commander Vex, Krell's second-in-command, joined them at the view screen. "And yet they've achieved spaceflight and begun colonizing their system. Fascinating." The view screen flickered to life, showing a blue-green planet orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Various orbital habitats and planetary outposts dotted the system. For a species so young, their expansion was impressive, if haphazard. "Their technology seems improvised," Krell observed, noting the patchwork appearance of their larger structures. "Their engineering defies conventional wisdom," Vex said. "They build without complete understanding, yet somehow their constructions hold. They call it good enough for government work." Krell's luminescence shifted to deep blue, the color of extreme skepticism. "No species advances without understanding. It's not possible." "Perhaps we should observe them more closely," Tora suggested. "The Council wants a complete assessment before making first contact." Krell nodded. "Deploy stealth probes. I want to understand these humans before we reveal ourselves." Within hours, the probes began transmitting data about human civilization. The bridge crew gathered around the central holotable, expressions ranging from shock to amusement as they watched recordings of human activities. "They deliberately hurl themselves down frozen mountains on primitive boards," Vex said, watching a human snowboarding off a cliff. "Look at this one," Tora added, pointing to a human jumping from an orbital platform with only a fabric canopy, to slow their descent. "They call it recreation." Krell's skin pulsed with alarmed red patterns. "They risk their already brief lives for entertainment?" The recordings continued. Humans diving into ocean depths without protective gear, climbing, vertical rock faces with minimal safety equipment, and accelerating primitive combustion vehicles to dangerous speeds. "They appear to have an unusual relationship with risk," Vex noted. "And they consume fermented grain beverages before many of these activities." "Fermentation? You mean they deliberately poison themselves with ethanol?" Krell asked incredulously. "Yes, Admiral. They call it beer, among other names. It seems to impair their judgment while simultaneously boosting their confidence." As they watched, a human on the screen lifted one of these beverages, handed their recording device to another human, and uttered a phrase that the ship's universal translator rendered as, "Hold my beer and watch this." What followed was a display of such reckless disregard for personal safety that even Vex, a veteran of 3 interstellar conflicts, flinched. "Impossible," Krell whispered. "No rational species would—" The transmission abruptly cut to another human, this one in a medical facility with various limbs immobilized, grinning despite obvious injury. "Worth it," the injured human declared. Krell's luminescence faded to a pale, sickly yellow. "Admiral?" Tora inquired cautiously. "Continue observation," Krell ordered. "But maintain maximum safe distance. Something is very wrong with this species." The Eternal Vanguard had been observing Earth for 3 local solar rotations when they detected an anomaly in the asteroid belt. A small group of humans had established a mining operation on a particularly unstable asteroid, rich in rare minerals, but with a core that their sensors indicated was highly volatile. "They can't possibly be ignorant of the danger," Vex said, examining the sensor readings. "That asteroid could fracture at any moment." Admiral Krell expanded his secondary respiratory sacs, the equivalent of a weary sigh. "Notify me if they appear to be in immediate danger. Otherwise, continue monitoring." Later that cycle, Lieutenant Tora's urgent alert broke the bridge's quiet routine. "Admiral, the humans in the asteroid belt, They're deliberately drilling into the unstable core. Krell rushed to the view screen. Indeed, the humans had positioned some kind of thermal boring device directly over the most volatile section of the asteroid. Their communications, which the Vanguard's systems had cracked days ago, revealed their awareness of the danger. "Geologist says we shouldn't drill here," one human said. "Yeah, but think of the bonus if we bring back twice the rhodium," another replied. A third human, apparently their leader, lifted a container of beer. "Sometimes you gotta roll the dice. Who's with me?" The others cheered and raised similar containers. Krell's skin flashed alarming patterns of red and purple. "They're going to kill themselves. Prepare emergency transporters. We may need to intervene." "Admiral," Vex cautioned, "the Council's directive forbids interference with pre-contact species." Krell was about to respond when the mining drill pierced the asteroid's core. Instead of the expected catastrophe, the humans somehow managed to extract the minerals using a technique that, while completely unorthodox, actually stabilized the core rather than triggering an explosion. "Impossible," Tora whispered. "Our models predicted 98.7% chance of critical failure." Vex's analytical tendrils twitched with confusion. They shouldn't have succeeded. Their method defies all established principles of astrogeology. Did they know something we didn't? Krell wondered aloud. The answer came moments later when the humans celebrated their success, one of them exclaiming, "Can't believe that actually worked. Thought we were goners for sure." The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. These humans hadn't possessed special knowledge. They had simply gambled with their lives and won through sheer luck. "Update the Council," Krell ordered, his voice unnaturally tight. "Inform them that the humans possess either remarkable intuition or remarkable luck. I'm not sure which possibility is more disturbing." Over the following weeks, the crew of the Eternal Vanguard documented dozens of similar incidents. Humans taking incalculable risks, often with minimal preparation or understanding, and somehow emerging victorious, usually battered but alive and celebrating their success. "They're not just lucky," Vex concluded after analyzing the data. "They fail constantly, but they learn from each failure, adapt quickly, and, most importantly, they're never discouraged by the possibility of failure." Krell contemplated this assessment. A species that treats failure as a temporary setback rather than a deterrent, and with their short lifespans, they have nothing to lose by taking risks. "Precisely," Vex agreed. "While we might spend decades calculating the perfect approach, they'll try 100 imperfect solutions and eventually stumble upon one that works." Krell's luminescence shifted to a thoughtful purple. "Perhaps that's why they've survived those extinction events. Not through superior technology or knowledge, but through sheer, stubborn persistence and adaptability." "Admiral," Tora interrupted, "we're detecting a new development. A human spacecraft has left their Mars colony. It appears to be heading toward us." Admiral Krell ordered immediate evasive action, but it was too late. Somehow, despite the Eternal Vanguard's advanced cloaking technology, the small human vessel had detected them and was now on an intercept course. "How did they find us?" Krell demanded, his bioluminescence pulsing with agitation. Lieutenant Tora worked frantically at her console. "Unknown, Admiral. Their scanning technology should be centuries behind ours." The communication system suddenly crackled to life, and a human voice filled the bridge. "Unidentified spacecraft. This is Captain Jack Reynolds of the independent mining vessel Lucky Strike. Don't bother pretending you're not there. Your engine leaves a quantum disturbance pattern. Elementary stuff." Krell exchanged glances with his officers. This was unprecedented. No pre-contact species had ever initiated first contact in the Councils. 10,000 years of exploration. After a moment of hesitation, Krell activated the response channel. "This is Admiral Krell of the Galactic Council vessel Eternal Vanguard. How did you detect our presence?" A chuckle came through the speakers. "Trial and error, mostly. Been sensing something odd in our neighborhood for days. Rigged up a custom scanner based on some theoretical physics papers. Honestly, I'm surprised it worked." The Admiral's skin displayed patterns of disbelief. "You created new technology based on theoretical models without testing and simply hoped it would function correctly?" "Pretty much," Reynolds replied cheerfully. "Look, we know you've been watching us. How about we skip the whole mysterious observation phase and just talk? I've got some excellent whiskey on board. It's like beer, but stronger. Before Krell could respond, Vex's urgent voice cut in. Admiral, the human vessel is approaching rapidly. Their trajectory is concerning. On the view screen, the Lucky Strike, a cobbled-together collection of modules that looked more like space debris than a proper spacecraft, was indeed hurtling toward them at an alarming speed. They're on a collision course, Tora exclaimed. Krell had just opened his mouth to order emergency defensive measures when the human ship executed an impossibly tight turn, coming to rest alongside the Vanguard with barely meters to spare. Apologies for the dramatic approach, Reynolds' voice came again. Wanted to make sure I had your attention. Permission to come aboard? I promise to behave. Every protocol in Galactic Council first contact procedures explicitly forbade such an encounter. Species were to be carefully studied, gradually prepared for the knowledge that they weren't alone in the universe, and only approached after years of psychological groundwork. Krell was about to refuse when Vex spoke up. Admiral, perhaps we should consider it. The humans have already shattered our expectations repeatedly. Our standard protocols may not apply here. After a moment's consideration, Krell agreed. Permission granted, Captain Reynolds, but you will be met by an armed security detail and subjected to full decontamination procedures. Fair enough, Reynolds replied. Though I should warn you, your decontamination might not be calibrated for the hot sauce on the tacos I had for lunch. 6 hours later, Captain Jack Reynolds stood in the Eternal Vanguard's conference room, seemingly unperturbed by the array of alien beings before him. He took a casual sip from a metal flask he'd somehow managed to smuggle through decontamination. So, he said, you folks have been studying us. Learn anything interesting? Krell, still recovering from the shock of Reynolds's casual attitude toward interstellar first contact, attempted to regain control of the situation. Captain, do you understand the significance of this moment? You are the first human to make contact with an extraterrestrial civilization. Reynolds shrugged. Someone had to be first. Might as well be me. Now, about that studying. What exactly brought you to our corner of the galaxy? Your species' survival, Vex answered, before Krell could stop him. You've endured multiple extinction-level events that should have eliminated you. The Council found this anomalous. Ah, Reynolds nodded. You mean the dinosaur killer, the supervolcano, and that nasty solar flare last century? Yeah, we've had some close calls. Close calls. Krell's translator struggled with the idiom, but the Admiral understood the meaning. Your species should have been extinguished multiple times over. Yet here you stand, making jokes and drinking poison for pleasure. Reynolds laughed. That's humans for you. We're surprisingly hard to kill. And speaking of drinking, he held up his flask. Care to try some? It's the good stuff, aged 15 years. The diplomatic incident that followed Captain Reynolds' impromptu visit to the Eternal Vanguard sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council. Not only had Admiral Krell violated first contact protocols, but the human had somehow managed to download a significant portion of the ship's cultural database before departing. Something the ship's security systems had only detected after he'd left. He claimed it was an accident, Krell explained to the Council representatives who had arrived to investigate the incident. Said his personal device just synced up with our system. The Council representatives, a consortium of the galaxy's oldest species, received this explanation with the equivalent of raised eyebrows. And you believe this? Asked Counselor Zith, an ancient gelatinous entity whose species had achieved spaceflight when humans were still perfecting stone tools. I am no longer certain what to believe about humans, Krell admitted. The situation grew more complicated when, 3 days later, humanity broadly announced its awareness of galactic civilization through all their communication channels. Rather than the panic or religious crisis the Council had predicted, humans responded with enthusiasm, curiosity, and an overwhelming flood of questions. They want to know everything, Lieutenant Tora reported, monitoring Earth's communications. Our biology, technology, history, culture, and they're particularly interested in our faster-than-light travel methods. Of course they are, Krell said resignedly. They want to know how to build it themselves. Vex, who had been analyzing human responses, looked up from his data screens. "Admiral, I've been correlating their questions. They're not just asking random questions about our technology. They're systematically filling gaps in theoretical knowledge. Within a month, they could potentially develop a working prototype based on our principles." "Impossible," Counselor Zith declared. "It took the Altarians 3 centuries to develop FTL after learning the basic theory." "With all due respect, Counselor," Vex replied, "humans don't approach problems the way we do. They're willing to test dangerous, unproven designs with themselves as test subjects." As if to prove Vex's point, Earth's news broadcasts began featuring stories about amateur FTL researchers working in garages and backyard workshops. Several had already created miniature space-time distortions, along with a few spectacular explosions. The Council representatives watched these reports with mounting alarm. "They'll destroy themselves," Counselor Zith predicted. "No species can advance this rapidly without catastrophic consequences." Admiral Krell, who had spent more time observing humans than any other council member, wasn't so sure. Perhaps, but they seemed to thrive on brushes with disaster. The council ultimately decided to establish a more formal diplomatic presence on Earth, hoping to moderate humanity's headlong rush into galactic civilization. A delegation of the galaxy's most experienced diplomats was dispatched to Earth's United Nations. They arrived to find Captain Jack Reynolds had been appointed as humanity's first ambassador to the stars. "We meet again," Reynolds grinned, greeting the council delegation in New York. "Sorry about downloading your database. If it helps, I've shared it with everyone, so at least we're all on the same page now." The head council diplomat, a serene being from a species that communicated primarily through color changes, turned an unprecedented shade of confused outrage. Reynolds continued, oblivious to the diplomatic crisis he'd just exacerbated. "Anyway, we've got some exciting news. Remember how your records showed FTL travel was impossible without specialized materials found only in the galactic core? Well, turns out you can substitute good old-fashioned Earth uranium if you reconfigure the field geometry. We've got a prototype ready to test next week. Care to watch?" The diplomatic team was still composing a response when a human assistant rushed in, whispering urgently in Reynolds' ear. "Change of plans," Reynolds announced. "The university team in Tokyo just successfully tested their prototype. We've officially achieved faster-than-light travel." He pulled out his communication device, showing footage of celebrating scientists. In the background, a small probe disappeared in a flash of light, reappearing seconds later. "How?" the council diplomat finally managed. "Our greatest scientists spent generations perfecting this technology," Reynolds shrugged. "Sometimes you just have to try it and see what happens. Which reminds me, we're organizing the first human expedition to the galactic core next month. Any advice for first-time interstellar travelers?" The Galactic Council's emergency session had been underway for 3 full cycles. Representatives from over 500 spacefaring civilizations debated what many were now calling the human problem. "They've compressed a millennium of technological development into less than a stellar cycle," the Zilani representative hissed through translucent gill slits. "Their advances violate every model of societal development we've established." "That's not the worst of it," added the Moravian delegate, his crystalline structure vibrating with concern. "They're sharing everything, every breakthrough, every technology. They're distributing it freely across their information networks." Admiral Krell, who had been summoned to provide his first-hand observations, listened patiently. When invited to speak, he rose slowly. "Honorable representatives," he began. "I believe we've been fundamentally misunderstanding humans. We keep expecting them to behave according to our established patterns, but they simply don't." "Explain," demanded the council elder, a being so ancient its species had evolved beyond physical form. "We advance through careful planning, thorough testing, and risk mitigation," Krell said. "Humans advance through what they call trial and error. They try something, fail spectacularly, learn from the failure, and immediately try again with adjustments. But the casualties," the Zilani representative began, "are accepted as part of their process," Krell finished. "Their phrase, 'hold my beer,' epitomizes this approach. It's a ritualistic announcement preceding a potentially disastrous, but innovative, attempt." The council chambers filled with the equivalent of murmurs as representatives processed this information. There's more, Krell continued. Since Captain Reynolds's impromptu first contact, humans have launched 37 deep space expeditions. They've already established outposts in 17 systems, including some we'd classified as too hazardous for settlement. How are they surviving in those environments? The Moravian asked. Through a combination of technological adaptations and what they call grit, Krell replied. When their environmental systems fail, they repair them with whatever materials are available. When food supplies run low, they find ways to cultivate local alternatives. When faced with hostile life forms, they somehow end up domesticating them. The Council Elder's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. You admire them. Krell's skin flushed with embarrassment patterns. I find them fascinating, and perhaps a little terrifying. Indeed, the Elder agreed. The question remains, how do we handle a species that advances so chaotically, yet effectively? The debate might have continued indefinitely if not for the unexpected arrival of a human delegation, led, unsurprisingly, by Ambassador Reynolds. Hope we're not interrupting, Reynolds said, striding into the council chambers with a confidence that belied the fact that humans had only recently joined galactic society. But we've got a situation that might interest you all. The council representatives stared in astonishment. The central chamber of the Galactic Council was located on an artificial megastructure orbiting a specially engineered star, a location that should have been impossible for humans to reach so quickly, let alone without invitation. How did you even find this place? The Zilani demanded. Reynolds waved dismissively. We asked around. Listen, there's something bigger happening. Our deep space explorers encountered a region about 12,000 light-years from here where stars are going dark, not dying naturally. Something's extinguishing them. The chamber went silent. The Elder's energy form dimmed noticeably. The Void Heralds, the Elder finally said. They have returned. Krell felt his secondary heart stutter. The Void Heralds were little more than a legend. Ancient entities that supposedly consumed stars for energy, leaving dead systems in their wake. The Council had records suggesting they appeared every few million years, but there had been no confirmed sightings in recorded history. Yeah, that's what the Arcturian traders told us, Reynolds nodded. Said these herald things wiped out whole civilizations last time they came through. Also mentioned you folks have been preparing for their return for eons. The Elder's form pulsed with confirmation. We have developed defensive technologies, evacuation protocols, containment strategies. Great, Reynolds interrupted. Because they're headed this way and we've got maybe 6 months before they hit populated systems. So, what's the plan? The Galactic Council's grand strategy against the Void Heralds, carefully developed over millennia, involved a coordinated retreat from their path, sacrificing uninhabited systems while collecting data on the entity's movements and capabilities. Once sufficient information was gathered, specialized defensive arrays would be deployed to redirect the Heralds away from galactic civilization. It was a sound plan, built on extensive simulations and the collective wisdom of the galaxy's oldest species. It required patience, precision, and above all, caution. The humans immediately proposed a different approach. You want to do what? Admiral Krell asked, certain he'd misheard. Ambassador Reynolds grinned. We want to capture one. Study it up close, figure out how it works, then use that knowledge to stop the rest. The council chamber erupted in protests. The Moravian representative's crystalline structure nearly shattered with agitation. These entities consume stars. They've destroyed civilizations more advanced than yours. Right, Reynolds nodded. That's why we need to understand them better. And the best way to understand something is to poke it with a stick and see what happens. You'll be annihilated, the Zilani representative hissed. Reynolds shrugged. Maybe. But what if we succeed? Wouldn't that be better than running away? The council debated for days, but the humans had already begun preparations. A volunteer team, led by Dr. Ellie Reyes, Earth's leading xenobiologist, was assembling a specially modified vessel called the Event Horizon. Its mission, intercept the outermost Void Herald and somehow contain it for study. When the council finally denied permission for the mission, citing the risk to galactic security, the humans launched anyway. They're beyond reckless, Councillor Zith declared when news of the launch reached the council. They'll alert the heralds to our defensive preparations. Admiral Krell, who had been granted observer status for the human mission, disagreed. Or they'll discover something we've missed in all our careful planning. The Event Horizon's journey took 3 weeks. Krell, monitoring from a safe distance, watched with growing apprehension as the ship approached the region where the nearest Void Herald had been detected. Dr. Reyes's team had developed a containment system based on principles similar to those used in human particle accelerators. Principles that, according to Council science, should have been wholly inadequate for containing cosmic entities. "We're in position," Dr. Reyes reported through the subspace channel. Void Herald detected at coordinates 227 Mark 341. It's beautiful. The view screen showed the entity, a swirling vortex of darkness that seemed to bend light around it, with tendrils extending outward toward a dying star system. "Beginning containment sequence," Reyes continued. "If this works, we'll establish a resonance field that should temporarily disrupt its energy absorption." What followed was, by Council standards, madness. The Event Horizon flew directly into the Herald's path, deploying equipment that, by any reasonable scientific assessment, should have been instantly destroyed. Instead, the containment field flickered to life, surrounding a portion of the entity's mass. "It's working!" Reyes exclaimed. "We've got a partial containment. Data streaming in now." For 17 minutes, the humans studied the trapped portion of the Void Herald. Their instruments recorded information that Council scientists had deemed impossible to obtain. Then everything went wrong. The Herald's main body seemed to notice the trapped fragment, turning its full attention to the human vessel. "Energy spike!" one of Reyes's team shouted. "The containment field won't hold." Krell watched in horror as the entity engulfed the Event Horizon. The ship's hull glowed red, then white from the energy being absorbed from it. "Dr. Reyes!" Krell called over the communication channel. "Evacuate immediately!" "Negative, Admiral," came Reyes's surprisingly calm voice. "We're still collecting data. Besides, the escape pods wouldn't make it far enough." The ship was clearly breaking apart now, sections of the hull peeling away like skin from a burned fruit. "Listen," Reyes said urgently. "We've learned something critical. The Heralds aren't consuming stars for energy. They're using stellar material to reproduce. They're not predators. They're a species in a reproductive cycle. That changes." "Nothing about your current situation," Krell replied, his skin displaying patterns of distress. "Maybe not," Reyes agreed. "But it changes everything about how to stop them. Transmitting all data now. And Admiral, tell the Council that sometimes you have to sacrifice a few to save many. That's a very human concept they might want to consider." The transmission cut off as the Event Horizon disappeared within the Herald's mass. Krell's bridge crew stood in silence, their various appendages and sensory organs lowered in what passed for respect among their diverse species. Then, unexpectedly, the communication system activated again. "Still there, Admiral?" It was Reyes's voice, though heavily distorted. "You wouldn't believe what we're seeing. The ship's gone, but our emergency suits are somehow intact. We're inside the Herald, and it's not at all what we expected." 3 months after the Event Horizon incident, the Galactic Council reconvened to address the Void Herald crisis. The chamber, typically a model of decorum, now buzzed with an energy not seen in millennia. In the center of the chamber stood Dr. Ellie, Reyes alive, though changed. Her skin had an unusual luminescence, and sensors indicated her cellular structure had been partially converted to a form of energy-matter hybrid unknown to Council science. "The Void Heralds aren't destroyers," she explained to the assembled representatives. "They're gardeners." She gestured, and a holographic display appeared, showing the internal structure of a herald, a vast, complex network of energy pathways surrounding compressed stellar material. "They harvest dying stars and redistribute their elements to form new stellar nurseries," Reyes continued. "It's part of the galaxy's natural life cycle. They've been doing this for billions of years, long before any of our civilizations emerged." Admiral Krell, who had witnessed the apparent destruction of the Event Horizon, still struggled to comprehend how Reyes and her team had survived. "But how did you," he began. "Survive?" Reyes smiled. "We didn't, exactly. When the Herald absorbed our ship, it also absorbed us. But instead of destroying our consciousness, it integrated us. We became part of its distributed intelligence network. It was trying to understand us, just as we were trying to understand it. The council representatives murmured among themselves, processing this extraordinary revelation. And the other members of your team? Councillor Zith asked. They chose to remain integrated with the Herald, Reyes said. I volunteered to be partially separated so I could return and explain. The Herald altered my physiology to make that possible. The Elder's energy form pulsed with concern. If what you say is true, why have the Heralds destroyed civilizations in the past? Misunderstanding, Reyes replied simply. When confronted with what they perceived as attacks, attempts to prevent their natural function, they defended themselves. But they're not inherently hostile. They're ancient, patient, and largely indifferent to our concerns unless we interfere with their cycle. So what do you propose? The Moravian representative asked. Reyes's luminescent skin brightened. Communication. The Heralds are willing to adjust their harvesting patterns to avoid populated systems. All they ask is that we don't interfere with their work in truly dying star systems. And we should trust this arrangement? The Zilani representative asked, skeptically. Based on the word of someone who is no longer fully human? Not just my word, Reyes said. The Heralds have offered to demonstrate their intentions. She held out her hand, and a small globe of swirling darkness appeared above her palm, a miniature version of a void herald. This is a communication node, she explained. It can connect the Council directly to the Herald's collective consciousness. You can negotiate terms yourselves. The chamber fell silent as the representatives contemplated this unprecedented opportunity. It was Admiral Krell who finally spoke. We've spent thousands of years fearing these entities, developing elaborate defenses against them. And the humans, in less than a month, not only made contact, but established diplomatic relations. Sometimes the direct approach works best, Reyes said with a smile. Sometimes you just have to say, hold my beer, and do the thing everyone says is impossible. In the cycles that followed, the Galactic Council established a working relationship with the Void Heralds. Star systems were designated for harvesting or preservation, and the Heralds adjusted their ancient patterns to accommodate the relatively young civilizations now sharing their galaxy. As for humanity, their stock in galactic society rose dramatically. Their reckless courage, once viewed as a liability, was now recognized as a valuable counterbalance to the Council's cautious conservatism. Human representatives were invited to join the Council's inner chambers, where their unorthodox perspectives frequently challenged millennia of established wisdom. Admiral Krell, whose original mission had been simply to observe humanity, found himself appointed as the Council's liaison to Earth. In that capacity, he often visited human settlements, gradually growing accustomed to their chaotic approach to problem-solving. During one such visit, at a diplomatic reception in New Armstrong City on the Moon, Krell found himself in conversation with Ambassador Reynolds. I still don't understand, Krell admitted, his skin displaying patterns of genuine curiosity. How does your species consistently survive situations that should, by all reasonable analysis, destroy you? Reynolds laughed, taking a sip from his glass of whiskey. It's simple, really. We don't overthink things. When faced with the impossible, we just give it a try anyway. Sometimes we fail spectacularly, but sometimes you change the galaxy, Krell finished. Exactly, Reynolds agreed. Care for a drink? I've got something special from my personal collection. Before Krell could respond, an alarm sounded. The colony's atmospheric system was reporting an unexpected pressure drop in one section. Nothing serious, a technician assured the gathered diplomats. Just a minor leak in the agricultural dome. Repair teams are on their way. Reynolds, however, was already moving toward the exit. That's my neighborhood. I should check it out. Surely the repair teams are better equipped, Krell said, following him. Probably, Reynolds agreed. But my apartment's right there and I've got some experimental sealant I've been wanting to test. Krell's skin flashed with alarm patterns. Experimental? As in untested? For a dome breach? Reynolds grinned as he handed his whiskey glass to a passing server. Only one way to find out if it works, right? Hold my beer, metaphorically speaking. As the human rushed off, Admiral Krell found himself doing something he never expected. Laughing. In the relatively short time he'd known them, Humans had faced down cosmic entities, revolutionized interstellar travel, and fundamentally altered the balance of galactic power. And they did it all with the same casual confidence with which Reynolds now approached a potentially catastrophic dome breach. Perhaps, Krell thought, there was something to this hold my beer philosophy after all. Not that he would ever admit it to the Council. The end.